Hey guys, we're going to start today on the Allied victories part of World War II. That is when the Allies, which are Great Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union, finally start to fight back and push the Nazi Empire, the fascist Italy, and the Japanese back. First, the United States and Great Britain and the Soviet Union, they decided that they wanted to defeat Hitler in Europe before really going full force after the Japanese. So, on the turning point will really be on beating the Nazis. What we're going to talk about today, the reasons behind the defeat of the Nazi Germany, how did the Allies force Hitler to fight a two-front war, what was the fate of Mussolini and Hitler, and then what strategy did the U.S. defeat Japan. We'll probably talk about Japan on our next one. Now, beating the Nazis. As Hitler uses Operation Barbarossa to attack the Soviet Union and push through there. He was able to quickly strike with the Blitzkrieg, but he got stalled down in a town called Stalingrad. And Stalingrad proves to be the turning point of the war between Russia and Germany, and pretty much kind of the turning point of the war in general. Russia's cold winter and superior numbers will stall the German advancement and allow them to surround and capture many of the invaders who began their long retreat back to Germany. Like I said in the last video, the Soviet Union will use the scorched earth policy where they burn all the food, buildings, and things like that. And by the time it gets to Stalingrad, it's wintertime. The Nazis were expecting a quick victory in the Soviet Union, so they didn't really have any winter clothes at first. So several of them will starve and will freeze to death. In Stalingrad, the fighting is actually from block to block, street to street, and gets to be kind of hand-to-hand combat in some spots. But Stalingrad is going to be the turning point of the war. You can scroll through there and look at the pictures of them fighting. Eventually, the Germans will surrender in Stalingrad, and they start getting pushed back out of the Soviet Union. That forces Hitler to kind of start fighting a two-front war, especially when we go with D-Day. Now, the U.S. and British forces, first of all, we decide to attack in Africa, because if we attack in Africa, we were able to split the Nazis away from their oil resources that they had in Africa. So we attack there first and then work up through Italy. Lacking men and supplies, Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps were finally driven out of Africa by the Allies. They were defeated in a decisive battle at El Alamein by the British, and almost all of the Africa Corps either surrendered or were wiped out. Eventually, the Allies will move into Italy. They called Italy the soft underbelly of the Nazi Empire. The Allies will cross the Mediterranean. They invade first Sicily and then move to the mainland of Italy. Rome was finally liberated in 1944, and the Italians will switch sides against the Nazis. Mussolini will be fleeing for his life, and he eventually will be caught by Italian partisans or Italian freedom fighters, and they pretty much beat him to death and hung him. You can see a picture of him hanging from the rafters after they had killed him. Once we defeated the Italians, we still had to force the Nazis out of their strongholds in Italy, because Italy is very mountainous, and they had created strong fortresses in the mountains. So it took us a long time to eventually break them out of those mountain fortresses. Crushing the Nazi Empire, the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union were the main Allied forces. They formed what is called the Grand Alliance. All three nations agreed to fight until Germany and Japan surrendered unconditionally. You can see a picture there. Winston Churchill is the British Prime Minister. Then you have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the American president during the time, and then Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. The Allied liberation of Europe began with the invasion of Normandy, France, on June 6, 1944, also known as D-Day or Demolition Day. It was the greatest amphibious landing in history and forced Hitler to fight a two-front war. There's a really good story about a spy that kind of um, made Hitler believe that the United States and the British were going to attack at a different area. He was a double agent. Hitler thought him to be his most trusted spy. In all honesty, he was actually working with the Allied forces. He made him think that they were going to land at a different area, so Hitler moved a bunch of his troops there and made the landing at D-Day a little bit easier, even though we suffer heavy casualties when storming the beaches of Normandy. You can look on the map there. We stormed 5 different spots. Utah and Omaha were mainly by the U.S. forces, and then Gold, Juno, and Sword were by the British and Canadian forces. Before we land, the night before we actually land on the beaches, we had flown U.S. paratroopers in behind lines, and they dropped out of airplanes and were supposed to meet up on the beaches. Unfortunately, they were taking such heavy anti-aircraft fire that a lot of the people got blown off course, and it was kind of a struggle for them to meet up. And there's some pictures of them dropping in behind the enemy lines. Now, when they land, they use the Higgins boats that's famous in the movie Saving Private Ryan, where they land on the beach. They're all 18, 19-year-old kids loaded up in these boats that held about 25 to 30 soldiers. And when they landed, it was chaos. Pretty much all hell broke loose. The minute those doors opened, they were under heavy machine gun fire and so forth. You can see the picture there of the scene from Saving Private Ryan, where it is a German machine gunner trying to mow our soldiers down. The United States had 3,393 soldiers killed on D-Day, but eventually were able to storm the beaches and take control of the Nazi strongholds and bunkers. And from there, we started pushing towards Germany. It took less than a month to liberate France, and we started pushing the Germans back into Germany, and eventually we were able to take over the Nazi Empire. Shortly after D-Day, the Americans liberated Paris, which had suffered 4 years of Nazi oppression. After freeing France, the Allies conquered fierce Nazi resistance all the way to Berlin. The U.S. will bomb German cities in the day while the British bomb them at night. The constant bombing crippled the German war production and broke Germany's will to fight. That was really daring because it was a lot easier to shoot planes down in the daytime. That's why they most often bombed at night. But the U.S. was willing to take that risk in order to slow down the war production. After the victory at Stalingrad, the Russians went on the offensive and slowly advanced over the next 2 years. In the spring of 1945, the Soviet troops reached Berlin from the east, and the American troops arrived from the west. I'm just going through some pictures right now. Hitler and his wife, realizing that the Soviets were closing in on them, they got into a bunker in Berlin, and on May 8th, 1945, Germany actually surrenders, ending the war. Hitler and his wife will commit suicide. His wife's name was Eva Braun. She bit down on a cyanide tablet. Hitler bit on a cyanide tablet and then shot himself in the head. The Russians will uncover their underground bunker, and you can see the skull that they found that saying was Hitler. We captured several German POWs, and we sent them to camps in the United States. We sent them to camps in Germany or in the Soviet Union. And after the war, a lot of them were released, and some of them even stayed in the United States. A lot of the soldiers that were fighting didn't believe in the Nazi propaganda, but they were being drafted into the army like the Americans were. By the end of the war, a lot of the Germans despised Hitler, and were hoping that the Allies would come in and defeat him. And I think that is where we are going to stop today. I will pick back up tomorrow with Japan, and then we will discuss the Holocaust the rest of the week. Hope everybody's doing great out there. Take care.